You are on Crocodile's True Stories channel. Enjoy listening.
It was supposed to be an ordinary Sunday. I left the firehouse around 6:30 that morning, earlier than planned. One of the newer guys offered to pick up the second half of my shift. Something about getting overtime before his wedding. I didn't mind. It had been a long week, and the idea of a few quiet hours at home sounded almost luxurious. I even swung by the corner cafe Kate likes and picked up her usual cinnamon oat latte with a sh*T of espresso and no whip. I figured maybe we'd sit on the porch together, watch the neighborhood wake up, like we used to. But when I walked in the door, it was too quiet. Still, not the kind of quiet that says peace, but the kind that whispers caution. You know the difference when you've been a firefighter long enough. When silence doesn't feel like rest, it feels like something waiting to be discovered. I set the coffee tray down on the entry table. The house smelled faintly like candle wax and something sharper underneath. Like cologne, but not mine. That was the first thing I noticed, and I told myself maybe it was just the cleaning spray. Kate had been on a home refresh kick lately. Then I heard the water running upstairs. The shower. Okay, I thought, she's just up early. Maybe she couldn't sleep. Maybe she decided to start her day before I got home. That's reasonable, right? But then I walked through the kitchen. That's when things started unraveling. There were 2 wine glasses on the dining table. Not in the sink. Not rinsed and forgotten. Just sitting there. One still had a smudge of lipstick on the rim. The other looked freshly used. The red wine had dried partway down the inside of the glass, like someone had taken their last sip and set it down mid-conversation. But what really caught me off guard wasn't the glasses. It was the sweater. A dark gray men's sweater, loosely draped over the back of one of the kitchen chairs. It looked expensive. Slim fit. Nothing I owned. It still held the shape of the person who had worn it, like it had just been peeled off minutes ago. I touched it out of instinct. It was still warm. My stomach dropped. That feeling, like gravity had just doubled, like your organs decided to rearrange themselves. That's when I saw it. A plastic gym badge half tucked into the collar. The name on it was simple and to the point. Ryan. Printed in white, bold capital letters beneath the logo for Titan Fit Gym. Our local spot. Titan Fit. That rang a bell. Kate had joined a new fitness class there a few months ago. Something about strength training and empowerment through discipline. She mentioned a trainer named Ryan once in passing. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Now his sweater was in my kitchen. I stood there, holding it in my hand, the badge swinging slightly as if to prove it was real. And still, I told myself maybe it was innocent. Maybe she borrowed it because she was cold. Maybe he left it and forgot. Maybe they sat down for a wine toast after a hard workout like civilized adults do, and it meant nothing. Maybe. But then again, maybe not. The upstairs water shut off. I froze for a second. My grip tightened around the sweater before I laid it gently back on the chair, like I didn't want to disturb the evidence. My heart wasn't pounding. It was slow. Too slow. Like my body knew something my brain wasn't ready to say out loud. Kate came down a few minutes later, hair still damp, wrapped in a towel, humming to herself. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "You're home early." No hesitation. No fear. Her smile was calm, casual. Exactly the kind of smile you'd give your husband if nothing was wrong. "I picked up your drink," I said, my voice even. I pointed to the table. "Looks like you had a guest?" She followed my gaze to the wine glasses, then to the sweater. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in guilt but like she was doing mental math. And then she laughed. Not nervously, not guiltily. Just like it was no big deal. "Oh, that's just Ryan's," she said, like she'd misplaced a shoe. "He dropped by yesterday to help me work on form, deadlifts and core alignment. We got into talking about shoulder mechanics and I offered him a drink. He must have left that behind." She moved toward the coffee and took a sip, like we were having a normal Sunday morning, like that wasn't someone else's name tag sitting 5 feet away from me in our kitchen. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I watched her dry her hair with the towel, wrap it in a bun, lean against the counter like it was just another weekend. Everything about her was controlled, like polished. too polished. "I thought we were supposed to meet up with your brother today?" I asked finally. Kate blinked. "No, that's next weekend." I knew that, but I asked to see if she'd stumble. She didn't. My gut clenched. I'd seen this before, not in Kate, but in people lying during crisis interviews. There's a certain smoothness to it, a shine. People who are telling the truth stammer. They look for the right words. They stumble into honesty. But Kate, she had the story ready. And if I had come home an hour later, I'm not sure that sweater would have even been there. I looked at her again. Really looked. She was smiling like nothing was wrong. But her eyes weren't looking into mine. Not really. It was like she was looking through me, past me. Like she wasn't worried because she didn't believe I'd ask any more questions. She turned and headed upstairs, saying something about changing into real clothes. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at those two glasses. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not heartbreak, just a clean, sharp break. Like glass under pressure. A fracture. Quiet, precise, permanent. And I knew right then that nothing about this morning was going to be okay. I didn't say anything to her that day. Not about the wine glasses. Not about the sweater. Not about the fact that her smile felt like a performance and her tone was too light, too even. But once you notice something is off, really off, it's like peeling back a wallpapered wall and finding rot behind it. You can't unsee it. You can't unfeel it. That afternoon, we went through the motions. She changed into jeans and a hoodie, made herself a smoothie, talked about how the neighbor's dog kept digging holes in our shared fence. I nodded, grunted, maybe asked a question or two. But my mind was already elsewhere, like it had stepped outside my body and started flipping through every recent memory, holding each one up to the light like a detective reviewing evidence. The truth wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. Little things started falling into place. Not new things, but things I'd ignored, chalked up to stress or routine or just growing older together. The first was her schedule. Kate used to work a standard 9 to 5 just like me. She'd get home around the same time I did. We'd start dinner together, maybe watch something dumb on Netflix, argue about whether to try that new Thai place and end up ordering pizza anyway. But over the last few months, that changed. She started staying later, saying her office was understaffed. HR was going through a transition, she said, and they were short on help. That part checked out, at least on the surface. She'd come home tired but alert, never exhausted. I remember thinking she seemed energized, like she'd come from a party, not paperwork. Then came the gym thing. Started small. A new sports bra. Then a pair of those compression leggings she once joked looked like superhero costumes. Suddenly, the mornings were earlier. She'd set her alarm for 6, slide out of bed before sunrise, and vanish with her duffel bag while I was still hitting snooze. I remember the first time I asked to come with her. Not in a possessive way, just curious. I'd been meaning to get back in shape anyway. She laughed. "Babe, it's not really your thing. It's all hit and circuits. You'd hate it." Maybe I would have. But still, something about the way she said it stuck with me. The routine changed in other ways too. We stopped having breakfast together. That was our thing. Sunday pancakes, weekday toast and jam. Coffee sipped while leaning against the counter in half-woken silence. Without warning, that disappeared. She'd blend protein shakes now. Chocolate peanut butter or berry spinach or something equally efficient. I'd come downstairs and find her already dressed, earbuds in, keys in hand. She always smiled. "Sorry, running late." But she was never late. She just didn't want to linger. Evenings grew quieter. She started bringing her phone to bed. At first it was little things, reading news, listening to podcasts. Then it was texting. Always with the screen angled away from me. Always with a faint smile playing on her lips. Sometimes she'd put on her headphones, turn her back to me, and sink into some curated world while I stared at the ceiling wondering when I became invisible. There were no fights, no blow-ups, just a slow decay, like watching paint crack or a balloon deflate over time. She still played the role, still cooked meals on Thursdays, still folded laundry, still made jokes at dinner when I was too tired to laugh. She still reached for my hand when we walked into a friend's party, still posted pictures of us on social media with captions like, "My rock," or "Can't do life without this guy." But it was all performance. You don't have to be an actor to recognize acting. The touches were mechanical. Her voice had this new lilt, bright, chirpy, full of sunshine and syllables, like someone doing an impression of happiness. Even her questions, "How was your shift? Did you sleep okay?" They felt like checking boxes, not checking in. The silence between us was the worst part. It used to be comfortable. Shared silence. Now it buzzed. Now it pressed against my chest like humidity. I started noticing how often her phone was face down on the counter. How she never left it behind anymore. Even to pee, it came with her. The one time I accidentally picked it up when it buzzed. She flinched. Said it was work. HR stuff, she mumbled. I let it go. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was tired, maybe projecting. That work stress was making me paranoid. That she was just changing, evolving, growing. But deep down, I knew. Sometimes love blinds you. And sometimes it hands you 1,000 red flags and begs you not to look up. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, creaky circles. She was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her body curled away from mine, her breathing steady, peaceful. I remembered how we used to fall asleep tangled together, legs twisted, arms draped, like we were still afraid to let go of each other even in dreams. Now we slept like roommates, familiar but distant, sharing the same bed, but not the same space. I tried to remember the last time we kissed. Not a quick peck on the cheek. A real kiss. Lips meeting with intention. Couldn't. The warmth had left the house long before she did. But I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. I still clung to fragments. Memories of road trips, beach days, rainy mornings spent in bed with coffee and nowhere to be. I tried to believe that those things weren't just past tense. That they still lived somewhere in her. That maybe I could reach them. So I stayed quiet. I didn't confront her. Didn't demand answers. Didn't bring up Ryan or the sweater or the wine. I let it sit. I let it grow roots in me, just to see what would happen. I became a collector of silences. I watched her from the kitchen window when she left in the mornings, duffel bag slung over her shoulder, smile already painted on her face. I watched how easily she moved, how light her steps were, like she wasn't carrying the weight I was. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe the worst part wasn't the lie. Maybe it was realizing that she'd already left, long before I noticed. That she'd done it quietly, without slamming any doors or yelling any words. That she'd slipped out of our life like smoke through a cracked window. And I didn't even see her go. It was early September when the cracks gave way and everything collapsed. Kate's birthday fell on a Thursday that year, so we planned to celebrate the following Saturday. A lakeside dinner with a few close friends at this rustic chic restaurant she'd been wanting to try for months. It had strung lights over the outdoor patio, live jazz near the docks, and a menu filled with dishes you couldn't pronounce without sounding pretentious. Kate loved it. I spent the week pretending everything was fine, smiling when she showed me the dress she planned to wear, nodding when she asked if I could pick up a bottle of Malbec on my way home from work. I even called the restaurant myself to confirm the table by the water, the candles, the dessert surprise. Every part of me hated the performance, but I played along because I needed to see it through. I needed closure, or clarity, or both. When Saturday came, she was glowing. That's not an exaggeration. She had that light to her, like someone whose favorite person had just texted them. She wore a black wrap dress I hadn't seen before, tight at the waist, cut high at the thigh. Her makeup was heavier than usual, bolder. Her hair was curled the way she always said took too long to bother with. She looked beautiful, but not for me. The guests were mostly friends of hers, co-workers, some gym people, 2 of her cousins. I recognized maybe half of them. The rest blended together in a sea of compliments and champagne glasses. I stayed close to the edge of the circle, smiling when appropriate, making small talk about traffic or football or how unseasonably warm the evening was. But my eyes never stopped moving. I kept scanning the crowd, watching her. That's when I saw him. Ryan. He was leaning against the railing near the water, sipping from a wine glass and talking to one of her gym friends. He wore a dark button-up shirt, sleeves rolled, forearms tanned and veined like someone who did pull-ups for breakfast. His smile was casual, too casual, like he was used to being the center of gravity without trying. Kate saw him about 2 minutes after I did. Her reaction was small, barely a flicker, but I caught it. Her smile widened just a little too much. Her voice went up half a pitch. And then she crossed the space between them like it was magnetic. They talked for a while. I stood with her cousin Lena, who was mid-story about a bachelorette party gone wrong. But I wasn't hearing a word. My eyes locked on Kate and Ryan. Their body language told a story their words didn't. She stood closer than necessary. He leaned in when he spoke. She laughed, tossing her hair the way she used to with me when we were first dating, back when she still tried. After a few minutes, they both drifted off from the crowd. Casual. Not suspicious. Just stepping away. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. People noticed, glanced around, shrugged. Someone asked where the birthday girl went. I pretended not to know. Eventually, they returned. Separately. Kate came back first, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, like someone who had just been kissed and liked the way it felt. Ryan came a few moments later, sipping from a new glass, adjusting his sleeves. She didn't look at me, not directly, but when she rejoined her group, she lit up the way people do when something inside them is sparking. Her laugh was louder, her gestures wider. She threw her head back and beamed like a woman reborn. I excused myself and stepped away from the table, walked toward the restaurant, toward the staff entrance, toward the cameras I knew would be mounted near the back patio. I wasn't a detective, but I was a man whose gut had been screaming for weeks. I needed confirmation, something I couldn't talk myself out of. I didn't tell Kate that I knew the restaurant's owner. Tom was the brother of one of my coworkers at the station. We'd been to his place a few times for game nights and Super Bowl parties. I called in a quiet favor. Nothing invasive, just a peek at the backlot cameras, he said. Just to ease your mind, if it's really eating at you. The footage came in 2 days later. It was grainy, time-stamped, silent. But the truth doesn't need audio. Around 8:37 p.m. Kate stepped out through the kitchen entrance into the backlot. She looked around briefly, like someone checking for headlights. Then Ryan followed. He didn't touch her at first. They stood facing each other, close, talking. He reached out, tucked her hair behind her ear. She leaned in. Their foreheads touched. And then she kissed him. Not a quick, guilty peck. Not something that could be mistaken for friendship. It was slow, familiar, confident. She pulled back smiling. Looked up at him like he was gravity. That was all I needed. I didn't show the footage to anyone. Didn't confront her. I didn't ask who he was to her or why she needed to disappear for 15 minutes in the middle of her own birthday party. I didn't demand the truth because I had already seen it. I knew what betrayal looked like, even in black and white. That night, lying beside her in bed, I kept my breathing steady. She smelled like vanilla and wine. Her voice was soft, humming some tune she probably hadn't realized she was singing out loud. She brushed against my arm in that absent-minded way that couples do, when touching isn't about affection, just geography. And all I could think was, how long has she been gone? Not physically. She was right there, inches away. But emotionally, spiritually, that version of Kate, the one who used to reach for my hand in the dark, who used to write little notes and tuck them in my lunchbox, she had checked out. Replaced by someone who kissed other men behind restaurants and laughed louder when I wasn't looking. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with a crash. It sneaks in, quietly, patiently. It starts with half-truths and long showers, with turned phones and excuses, with the slow drip of distance until the person you loved is a stranger wearing their face. That night, I watched her sleep. I tried to remember what it felt like to trust her, and I couldn't. The morning after her birthday, Kate was humming in the kitchen. I remember that detail so vividly because of how wrong it felt. She always hummed when she was happy. Not performatively happy, genuinely. When we first moved into the house, I'd catch her humming while unpacking, while painting the baseboards, while dancing barefoot in the living room with a wine glass in hand. It was something soft and absent-minded, like her happiness had nowhere else to go and just leaked out as sound. But that morning it was jarring. She was flipping pancakes, singing under her breath. Her shoulders swayed to a rhythm I couldn't hear. She didn't notice me at first. I had walked in barefoot, still in a t-shirt and sweatpants, eyes heavy from a night of almost sleep. The silence between us had grown so thick that I could no longer tell if it was tension or just the absence of connection. "Morning," she said when she finally saw me. "Hope you're hungry." She plated a stack of pancakes and set them on the table like nothing had happened. No mention of disappearing at her own party. No questions about whether I was okay. No explanation. Just maple syrup, fresh strawberries, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I sat at the table. She poured coffee into both our mugs. Mine black, hers with oat milk and honey, like always. For a while, I watched her move around the kitchen. She wore one of my old hoodies, sleeves too long, her hair still messy from sleep. To anyone else, this might have looked like a picture of domestic bliss. But to me, it felt like watching a ghost go through familiar motions. Someone who had memorized the routine but forgotten the reason. It wasn't until the second cup of coffee that I spoke. "I need you to pack your things," I said, without looking up from the mug. Silence. A long, stretching pause. I didn't fill it. I let it hang in the air like a question she couldn't dodge. Eventually, she blinked. "Wait." "What?" I looked up. "You heard me." She set her fork down. "Jacob, what are you talking about?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't slam the table. I just leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. "You kissed someone else behind a restaurant. 2 nights ago. During your birthday. I saw it." Her expression didn't change immediately. I think she was hoping I was bluffing, that she could lie her way through one more round. "Who told you that?" she said, cautious now. "Who's feeding you this crap?" I shook my head. "Does it matter?" She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the tile. "Jacob, I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not. It's exactly what it looked like," I said, voice still even. "You weren't drunk. You weren't coerced. You weren't confused. You kissed him like it meant something." She opened her mouth again, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I'm not asking you to explain. I'm not asking you to justify it. I'm telling you, it's time to go." And that was it. No argument. No screaming match. No dramatic tears. Kate looked at me, eyes wide and searching, as if trying to locate the version of me who used to chase her down during fights, who used to beg for clarity when things got murky. But I wasn't that man anymore. I didn't need to understand. I had already watched the footage. I had already done the math. The answer was 0. She stood still for a long time, then finally turned and walked upstairs. I stayed at the table. Didn't eat. Didn't drink. Just listened to the quiet rustle of movement overhead, the sound of drawers opening, hangers sliding, zippers tugged closed, the dull thump of shoes tossed into a bag. 47 minutes later, she came down the stairs with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. No drama. No tears. Just a quiet resignation, like someone clocking out from a job they knew they'd already quit. She paused by the front door. "Is this really what you want?" she asked. I nodded. She stared at me a moment longer, waiting for a crack, for softness, for mercy. It never came. She walked out the door without another word. The moment it closed behind her, the house exhaled. That's the only way I can describe it. As if the walls themselves had been holding their breath. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat in the chair where I'd given her the truth, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug, listening to the strange, impossible quiet. And then I got up and began reclaiming what was mine. It started in the kitchen. I dumped the rest of the pancakes in the trash, washed the plates, scrubbed the counters twice, threw out the fancy oat milk she always bought. Then I moved to the bathroom, tossed the rosewater face mist, the 4 different shampoos she never used past the halfway point, the drawer full of unopened face masks. I took down the framed photo of us in Colorado, sun-kissed and smiling on a mountain peak, and put it in the donation box. Took the throw pillows off the couch that she insisted, tied the room together. Folded up the fleece blanket she always stole and shoved it in the back of the closet. I wasn't angry. I was methodical. I wanted the house to breathe again. Later that afternoon, I walked through each room like I was walking through someone else's life, touching the things she had touched, removing the traces that no longer made sense. Her scent was still everywhere. On the bed sheets, on the robe hanging behind the door, in the laundry detergent she insisted on because it was eco-friendly and allergen-free. I changed it all. Washed the linens twice. Bought a new detergent. A different scent. Something that didn't remind me of her hair, or her skin, or the way she'd lean into me in half-sleep murmurs. That night I slept alone. And for the first time in what felt like months, I actually slept. No sounds of shifting beside me. No cool silence from the woman lying inches away but miles apart. No unspoken weight between us. Just me. The silence didn't feel lonely. Felt earned. Honest. Like a house stripped clean of performance. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. I didn't burn her things or smash picture frames. I didn't spiral. I didn't rage. I just took back my space piece by piece. And in doing so, I realized how much of myself I'd handed away without noticing. I had let her curate our world, our home, our routines. I let her decide what music we listened to, what shows we binge-watched, what brands were good enough for the kitchen. I let her fill the rooms with her tastes until mine got tucked into corners or disappeared entirely. Now I was learning how to take up space again. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer and watched the streetlights flicker on. My dog, Ollie, lay beside me with his chin on my foot, snoring softly. I hadn't heard him sleep that soundly in weeks, and I realized I wasn't grieving the loss of her. I was grieving the years I'd spent shrinking to keep her happy. But that part of me, it was gone now, packed up with her shoes and her perfume and her gym bag full of secrets. The house didn't feel empty, felt new. It had been about 6 weeks since Kate left when I decided to take some time away. Not because I was running from anything, but because staying in the house, even reclaimed, started to feel claustrophobic. Everything had settled. Her scent was gone. Her shadows erased. The home was mine again. But there was a stillness that felt like it needed to be stirred. So I called Mason. He and I had been friends since high school. Former teammate, lifelong smartass, the kind of guy who kept you honest and insulted you lovingly. He owned a cabin near Payette Lake, about 3 hours north, where he escaped every few months to write, fish, or disappear off the grid when city noise got too loud. You sound like a guy who needs a fire, a dog at his feet, and some bad whiskey, he said over the phone. He wasn't wrong. I packed light. A couple of hoodies, jeans, boots, the novel I'd been meaning to finish for 2 years. I left my phone on Do Not Disturb for most of the drive. No messages were waiting anyway. The cabin was perfect. Nestled among tall pines, just enough insulation from the world without being completely off the map. Mason had upgraded the Wi-Fi and the grill, but otherwise, it was the same place we used to come to when we were young and full of beer and bad decisions. The first few days, I did a whole lot of nothing. Slept in. Took Ollie for long walks along the water. Cooked over fire. Read with my feet up. It was the kind of boredom that felt intentional, earned, not forced. On the 4th evening, I wandered into town to check out the little cafe Mason had mentioned. Best coffee north of Boise, he claimed. It sat near the water's edge, all wood paneling and wide windows. I grabbed a seat by the window with my coffee and watched the lake sparkle through the glass. And that's when I saw her. Kate. She was sitting 2 tables away. Hair longer, lighter, sun-kissed, maybe. She wore a jean jacket and that smile I knew too well. But she wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man. Not Ryan. This guy was different. Younger, maybe. Athletic in a loud kind of way, fitted shirt, arms too tight, hair gelled into compliance. He laughed too hard. Touched her arm too quickly. The kind of guy who didn't realize he was being watched. Kate leaned in. Her body language was familiar, too familiar. The way she smiled with her whole face. The playful swat on his shoulder when he said something she could pretend was outrageous. Her eyes lingered on him like he was the most interesting man in the room. I sat very still. She hadn't noticed me. I was half-shadowed by a post, hood up, mug in hand, and yet I couldn't look away, because I recognized the performance. Not just the gestures or the cadence of her laugh, but the entire act. I'd seen it before. Hell, I'd been the audience for years. It was the same energy she used on our second date, when she quoted Hemingway and pretended to hate sushi. The same script she used at our anniversary dinner in year 3, when she held my hand across the table and talked about forever. Now it belonged to someone else. The stranger across from her didn't know what I knew. He didn't see the cracks behind the charisma. He hadn't seen the wine glasses on the table, or the way she lied with grace. He hadn't watched her leave a marriage like someone exiting a yoga class. Quiet, casual, unaffected. But I had. And I knew what came next. They'd date. He'd fall. She'd flicker. She'd laugh at all the right times, remember his drink order, surprise him with things he mentioned once in passing. He'd feel chosen, important, seen. And then one day, he'd wake up and notice her phone was always face down, that her answers were a little too polished, that she was always just out of reach, even when she was sitting right next to him. And maybe, if he had a strong enough gut or a weak enough sleep schedule, he'd start asking the same questions I once did. And the cycle would repeat. I watched her laugh again, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hurt, or longing, or even that nauseating sting of betrayal. I felt nothing, just understanding, like watching a play you'd seen before, only now from the cheap seats, and suddenly realizing how bad the acting really was. I finished my coffee, left a tip, pulled my hood back up, and I left. I didn't stop to say hello, didn't tap the glass, didn't wait for her to notice me and flash that look of surprise, of forced regret. I just stepped out into the cool evening, let the door jingle behind me, and walked back toward the trail that led home. Ollie trotted along beside me, tongue out, tail wagging, as if sensing that I had finally turned a corner. Because some chapters don't need revisiting. Some people don't evolve. They just change dance partners and recycle their choreography. That night, back at the cabin, I sat by the fire and opened my book. Mason had left a bottle of scotch on the shelf with a note. "Don't be noble. Drink it." So I poured a glass, curled into the corner of the worn couch, and felt the weight lift. Not because she was out of sight, but because she was no longer in focus. I didn't check her social media, didn't wonder what she told the new guy about me, didn't care whether she was sorry. Closure didn't come in a letter or an apology. It came in the quiet moment when I realized I no longer wanted to understand her. I just wanted to move forward.